Welcome back, my little lads. These videos follow the development journey for Penumbra Tower, a grid-based roguelike where the player has to navigate through randomly generated floors of the Penumbra Tower, defeating enemies and traveling deeper within. Absolutely huge news, the channel has hit 3,000 subscribers. When I started uploading back in October, I gave myself a goal to reach 100 subs in the first year, but we are way past that now and it's only been 5 months. So thank you guys so much, and subscribe if you haven't already. Anyways, let's get into what I've been working on. So, if you'll remember back in the previous devlog, we wrote a movement script for the enemy AI. In this devlog, we're going to completely rewrite that script. The focus for this devlog is expanding on movement behaviors. In the previous devlog, both enemies and the player could only move and attack one tile in any direction. My goal right now is to create a more dynamic movement behavior to increase the variety of gameplay. Now, I've been having some trouble recording my coding process for this part as I keep rewriting the code, but I think I've gotten to a point where it's working and thought I should show you what I have just in case I break it again. I would like to rework it one more time because, as you'll see, this code is some hot garbage. So I think the best way to explain this is to actually show it to you, so I've made this little mock-up in Krita. As I've said, the issue was that enemies attack and move one unit in any direction every turn, which is fine, but it isn't that fun or engaging. Now, enemies are going to inherit a random movement behavior. Think of it like this. This goblin can spawn into the room with the movement behavior of a rook, meaning it will move something like this. But if you imagine a rook on a chessboard, it has the ability to move across the entire board, which this goblin is not going to have. So I guess saying this is a rook isn't quite correct. When an enemy spawns in, it will also get an amount of actions it can do each turn. For example, with this goblin, it can only move 2 units each turn. There are also going to be 2 edge cases with this when we talk about unit actions. The enemy will never use more actions than it has available, but if the next action in the loop takes the enemy farther away from the player, the loop will break. This will stop the enemy from over-moving. Also, if the enemy reaches the player, they will only ever attack one time. At this point, I've added in behaviors for horizontal and vertical rook movement and diagonal bishop movement. Okay, I've stalled long enough. Here's what I've written so far. So this getBehavior method here just takes the behavior enum and randomly picks one of the options when the enemy spawns onto the grid. I also have some if statements here which toggles a little UI icon to indicate which behavior was chosen. This getDirection method is also an enum. All it does is it calculates the direction of the enemy to the player, it then normalizes it, and then turns it into a 45-degree angle. This runs at the start of each turn because the player's position will probably update every turn. Okay, buckle in because here is where the code starts to get a little messy. Okay, a little bit exaggerated. So here we are returning the best tile based on the direction and the distance. This code is pretty gross looking because of the amount of OR statements I've used inside of each if-else, but it's working, I guess. The action iteration is the main method that controls how everything is being called. As we loop through each of the actions, we grab whatever tile was returned from the closest tile method. We check if the tile's direction is greater than that of the current distance from the player, and if it is, we break the loop. This is what I mentioned earlier about stopping the unit from over-moving. If the tile is not farther away, we then set the enemy unit to that tile, and then at the very end, if we are already beside the player and cannot move any closer, we would then use an attack action instead of moving. The highlight tiles method is pretty similar to the get closest tile method, except instead of returning the tile in a single direction, it adds all the tiles in all available directions within the amount of actions that we can use, and then highlights them I think I have it set to a mouse over right now for the highlight to show up. So, from all the code I've shown so far, here's how the game is currently looking. As you can see, two enemies have spawned, one with rook movement and the other with bishop. The number beside the icon is supposed to show the amount of actions that they can move each turn, but right now it's just a placeholder number. When I hover over the enemies, you can see all the possible movements being highlighted. And when the turn switches here, you can see they are following the movement patterns correctly. Next, I'm going to work on optimizing this code right now because it's not very scalable. As I'm recording this part, I haven't started on the optimization yet, so hopefully in the next clip everything will be working and also looking a lot better.
2 seconds later.
Alright. Things have not been going to plan. Here, you guys can have a look. I'm just going to scroll through this quickly. You can pause the video if you want to decipher these hieroglyphics if you want. I've definitely optimized and reduced the amount of stupid code, but at the cost of the movement behaviors not functioning properly anymore, so, you know, it is what it is. So here's an example of one issue. I thought I could be smart and remove the direction enum that I was using, but it ended up creating this weird jumping behavior.
I'm fast as fuck, boy!
As the enemy doesn't know to stick to a single direction. It's kind of interesting, but
not quite my tempo.
Here's another issue where the highlight from the previous turn sticks around for the first mouse over event and then just disappears after that. I did create a backup of the original code that I reverted to just in case this happened. I could have kept working on this version, but I realized that the whole reason I was doing this was kind of to make it easier to add a different movement pattern in the future if I wanted to add more variation, but I realized that I didn't really need to do that because the max movement patterns I would have would probably be like 3 or 4 maybe, so I'm pretty much at that amount already. So instead I went back to the original code and started optimizing that. Let's take a look at what we got going on here. So here's the original highlight tiles method. Look at this shit. Making variables just to store the tile to check if it's null. Disgusting. Boom, check this out, switch statements, and oh, what's that? An extra behavior added at the bottom? On to the next victim. Look at this, what's even happening here? And we replace all of those OR statements with even more switch statements. This is what true optimization looks like. All jokes aside, the AI controller is in a much better spot now, and here's the final outcome from the changes that we did. I've gone ahead and swapped the chess icons for a grid style icon. I think this more accurately represents the behavior and is easier to identify. And wow, check out these smooth tile highlight animations. Also, as you can see here, I've implemented a random range value for the enemy actions and also connected the UI element to display it properly. Looking at it again now, maybe I'll redo the icons for the movement behaviors. I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do on movement behaviors for now. I'm probably going to end up taking these out of the AI controller and moving them into their own script. That way I can use them in more places. The next devlog is probably going to focus on the player controller. I have some interesting plans for that, and maybe it will also include some sprite work for either tiles or maybe a new enemy design. It's nice to break up the development with some design work. That's all I have for this devlog. I'll see you in the next one.